Lucia woke before the sun rose as she always did. The room was dim, washed in the faint grey of early dawn. She lay still for a moment, her breath shallow, her body aching from a night of restless sleep. Even lifting her head from the pillow felt like work. "Another day," she whispered, though there was no one to hear. The words came not from hope, but from habit. She pushed herself upright, one trembling hand on the nightstand, the other clutching her chest. Her heart beat slower these days, not weak from sickness but from weariness, a kind of tiredness that reached far beyond the body. She looked toward the small cross hanging on her wall. "Lord, I'm still here," she murmured, "but I don't know how much longer I can keep going." Her voice cracked, the words dissolving into silence. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed down like a weight. And for a long time she sat there, small, still and tired, unaware that heaven was already stirring, ready to lift what she could no longer carry. The days blurred together. Mornings, afternoons, nights, all the same, all slow. Lucia moved carefully through her home, each step measured, each breath shallow. Even the simplest tasks, folding a blanket, pouring water, opening a window, left her exhausted. Her body wasn't the only thing weakening. Inside, her heart seemed to be dimming too. The prayers that once came easily now faltered on her lips. She still spoke to God, but her words had lost their strength. "Thank you for today," she whispered one morning, though she didn't feel thankful. "Be with me," she said another night, though he felt so far away. There was no rebellion in her, just fatigue. The fatigue of faith held for too long without feeling. Some nights she would sit in a chair by the window, eyes closed, whispering, "I think I'm done, Lord. I've given all I have." And yet, as she said it, something deep within her, a spark, a whisper of his spirit, refused to fade. It waited. It watched. It would not let her go. Lucia's home was small, quiet and clean. Too clean, perhaps. Each corner carefully kept, each dish washed and stored. But beneath the order lay a silence that had grown heavy with years. Her children lived far away, their visits rare but kind. They called when they could, though their voices always sounded rushed, the words polite and brief. She didn't blame them. Life was full for them, and almost finished for her. In the long afternoons, she would sit near the window, watching people walk by outside. Couples, mothers with children, men carrying groceries. She smiled faintly at them, though they never looked her way. There were moments when her heart would ache so deeply she thought it might stop, not from illness but from invisibility, the slow erosion of being unseen. One night, she folded her hands and whispered into the emptiness, "If you can see me, Lord, if you still know I'm here, please just let me feel it once more." Her words dissolved into the dark. No answer came, only silence, soft, infinite, aching. But somewhere, in that silence, heaven began to move. The one who lifts the weary had heard her faintest cry. That night, Lucia sat on the edge of her bed, the small lamp casting a pool of light around her. The room felt heavier than usual, the air thick, her body trembling with fatigue that no amount of rest could heal. She looked at her wrinkled hands, hands that had once held children, planted gardens, written letters, and wiped tears, now frail, unsteady, trembling from weakness. And then, without planning to, she began to pray. "Lord," she whispered, "I can't keep doing this. My body is tired, my heart is tired. I'm tired of waking to the same ache every morning. If you want me here, I'll stay, but I don't have the strength anymore." Her voice quivered. "If it's time to come home, please, just take me. But if you want me to stay, you'll have to carry me, because I can't walk another step on my own." The words left her lips like a sigh, fragile and final. She didn't know it then, but that was the prayer heaven had been waiting for, not of strength, but of surrender. For the Lord does not enter the strong heart. He comes to the heart that says, "I can't," and in that brokenness, he begins his work. That night stretched longer than any Lucia could remember. The clock ticked softly, the shadows of the curtains danced faintly across the floor, and her thoughts drifted like tired waves. She had prayed, she had surrendered, but no answer came. No warmth, no vision, only silence. She lay still, her eyes open in the dark. Maybe that was it, she thought. Maybe he's already decided. Maybe he's waiting to take me quietly, in my sleep. Oddly, she wasn't afraid. The thought of rest, true rest, almost comforted her. She closed her eyes, whispering one last time, "If you're near, just hold me, that's all." The room remained still, and yet something subtle began to shift, not outside, but inside. The silence deepened, not into absence, but into peace. It was as though the darkness itself had changed texture, no longer heavy, but soft. Lucia drifted to sleep, with tears drying on her cheeks, unaware that the next morning her eyes would open to something entirely new. When Lucia awoke, she noticed it immediately. The light. It wasn't just morning light. It was warmer, brighter, more alive. The kind of light that feels aware. It wrapped around her like a soft blanket, touching her face, her hands, her shoulders. For a moment, she thought she was still dreaming. The usual ache in her chest was gone, replaced by something gentle, almost like strength, not from her, but in her. She sat up slowly, blinking. The air felt different too, calm, fragrant, still. She looked toward her window, and for the first time in years she could hear the birds clearly, their song like laughter, like joy reborn. And in the stillness, she felt it, a presence, not seen, not imagined, but real. She covered her mouth with her hand as tears filled her eyes. "You came," she whispered. And in that quiet moment, the one who had been watching through her sleepless nights was there, near, patient, radiant with mercy. The day had begun, and so had her lifting. Lucia sat completely still, afraid that even breathing might disturb what was happening. The light around her had not faded. It seemed to pulse gently, alive, warm, tender. She didn't see anyone, yet she knew without question she wasn't alone. A stillness filled the room, but it wasn't the silence she had known before. This was different, a stillness that hummed with life, that listened back. Her heart, once dull and heavy, began to flutter faintly at first, then with steady rhythm. And then she felt it, a touch. Not on her skin, but deeper, as if invisible hands had rested upon her shoulders, steadying her. Every ache in her body seemed to quiet, every weight inside her chest began to lift. The years of exhaustion, of loneliness, of carrying life alone, all began to dissolve beneath the warmth of that presence. She closed her eyes, tears falling freely. "Is it you?" she whispered. The warmth deepened. Her answer did not come in words, but in peace, that unmistakable, sacred peace that only one voice could bring. She did not need to see. She knew who had come to lift her. Lucia did not speak. She only listened, to her own heartbeat, to the quiet that surrounded her, to the strange sense of being seen completely. Then, gently, the silence broke. A voice, soft as a whisper, strong as eternity. Lucia. Her breath caught. The sound of her name, spoken with such tenderness, made her tears fall harder. "You are not forgotten." Her lips trembled. "But I have nothing left," she whispered. "I'm too old, too tired. I've done all I could. You do not need to do more," the voice said. "You need only to rest in me." She wept openly now, her hands shaking. "But I can't go on." "Then let me carry you." The words were simple, but they sank deep, deeper than her pain, deeper than her bones. Something within her loosened, as if a knot that had been tied for years was gently undone. It was not a command, it was love, pure, patient, and stronger than death itself, and for the first time in her long, weary life, Lucia truly rested. The presence drew closer. She could feel it, not outside, but within her. The weight in her chest lifted, her shoulders relaxed, and her breath deepened. She had spent so long bowing under invisible burdens, grief, guilt, fatigue, memories of what she could no longer do. But now, all of it began to rise, lifted by unseen hands that bore every sorrow she had ever carried. She didn't rise from her chair, but her spirit did. In her mind it was as if she were standing again, not in this room, but in sunlight. She felt strong, steady, renewed. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you for finding me here." And in her heart came the reply, "I never lost you, my child." She covered her face and sobbed, not from sadness, but from the unbearable kindness of it all. When she opened her eyes again, her body was the same, her house unchanged, but everything inside her had been transformed. She was no longer the woman too weak to continue. She had been lifted, not by her will, but by his love. The next morning, Lucia rose earlier than usual. Her joints still ached, her breath still came slow, yet something within her felt strangely new, quietly alive. She didn't rush. She simply sat on the edge of her bed, hands resting on her lap, and whispered, "You're still here, aren't you?" There was no voice this time, just peace, but that peace was enough to steady her hands and fill her heart with calm. As she stood, she noticed something remarkable. She didn't feel the same weight pressing down on her. The air felt light. Her steps, though small, carried a quiet strength. She walked to the kitchen and made her tea, humming softly, a melody she hadn't sung in years. The tune came from nowhere, yet it felt familiar, as though heaven had placed it on her lips. Lucia smiled, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "You lifted me," she whispered. Her body was still frail. Her life was still simple. But her strength now came from somewhere, from someone, beyond herself. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was being carried. Later that week, the sun broke through after a long stretch of grey days. Lucia felt a quiet nudge in her spirit, gentle, inviting. "Go outside," it seemed to say. She hadn't left the house alone in months. Her knees ached, her balance wasn't steady, and the thought of falling frightened her. Yet the feeling persisted. So she wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, leaned on her cane, and stepped out. The moment the sunlight touched her face, she stopped. The air was fresh, fragrant with earth and blossoms. The breeze carried a warmth that felt almost like an embrace. Lucia closed her eyes and breathed deeply. "Oh, Lord," she whispered, "I forgot how beautiful the world still is." She took a few careful steps down the path, her hands trembling, but her spirit soaring. To anyone passing by, it was just an old woman walking slowly in the morning light, but heaven saw something else, a soul that had fallen long ago, now standing again, not by her strength but by his. As the days passed, Lucia's small home began to change. Though nothing physical was altered, the light seemed brighter, the air warmer, the silence softer. Every corner that once felt lonely now carried a quiet presence. Her worn furniture, her faded curtains, her little Bible on the table, all seemed touched by something eternal. She prayed often now, but not with long words. Her prayers were short, whispered, tender. "Thank you. I'm here. I love you." She began to notice small wonders again. The laughter of children outside, the flutter of wings by the window, the scent of bread from a neighbor's home. Each one felt like a small whisper from God, reminding her, "I am still with you." And though her body still tired easily, her heart no longer did. Her light had returned, not the flickering candle of effort, but the steady glow of grace. Lucia had not regained her old strength. She had found something better, his strength flowing quietly through her. One morning, Lucia awoke with a gentle stirring in her heart, a thought she hadn't had in a long time. Visit Maria. Maria lived 2 doors down. She was younger than Lucia, but sorrow had found her early, a widow too, struggling with grief that clung like shadow. Lucia hesitated at first, unsure if she had the strength, but the quiet nudge came again, loving, certain. "Go." So she dressed slowly, wrapped herself in her shawl, and walked down the narrow street. Her steps were unsteady, but her heart was light. When Maria opened the door, surprise filled her face. "Lucia, you came all this way." Lucia smiled softly. "I wanted to see you, dear, and to tell you something." They sat together at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around warm cups of tea. Lucia spoke of her weariness, of how she had been lifted, not by her own will, but by the love that had found her. As she spoke, Maria began to cry, not from pain but from recognition. You sound like peace itself," she whispered. Lucia smiled. "No, not peace itself, dear. Just someone held by it." And in that little kitchen, two tired hearts felt the nearness of heaven. After that visit, Lucia began to move through her days differently. Her strength was still fragile, her steps slow, but everything she did now carried a sense of quiet service. She no longer saw herself as a woman waiting to die, but as one entrusted with the small kindnesses of Christ. She baked bread again, not for herself, but to share. She called those who were lonely, wrote letters to friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Even when she couldn't do much, she prayed, simple prayers that covered names she remembered and faces that came to mind. Every act was small, but done with tenderness. One evening she told the Lord, "I thought you lifted me so I could live longer, but now I see you lifted me so I could love longer." The response she felt in her heart was immediate, gentle. "You love with my strength now." Lucia smiled. It was true. She no longer feared weakness. She wore it like a garment of grace, a reminder that she was carried every day by hands far stronger than her own. As the months passed, Lucia's pace slowed again. Her body began to falter once more, but her spirit remained unshaken. The peace that had once visited her had taken root, not fleeting, but steady, living within her. She spent her evenings by the window, watching the sky melt from gold to deep blue. Each sunset felt like a prayer answered, each breeze like a whisper from the one who had lifted her. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine his hand in hers, warm, firm, steady. "You're still carrying me," she'd murmur. And always the answer would come, not in sound but in stillness. Always. Her home, though small, became a resting place for others. People came to her for comfort, for prayer, for silence that healed more than words. And every person left lighter than they arrived. Lucia didn't see it, but heaven did. The once broken woman had become a vessel of peace. Her strength had faded, but her soul had learned to soar. Winter came quietly that year. Soft snow blanketing the streets, the air crisp and still. Lucia watched from her window, her breath forming faint clouds in the cool air. The days had grown shorter, her steps slower, her hands weaker. She knew what was happening. Her body was fading again, the same slow unraveling she had felt before. But this time there was no fear. She no longer prayed for healing or strength. Instead, she whispered one simple request: "Stay with me, Lord, until I see you." Each night, she lay in bed and felt the rhythm of her heartbeat, steady, fragile, peaceful. Her breaths came shallower with each passing week, but she was not troubled. She had already been lifted once. She knew he would lift her again when it was time. Her children called more often now, sensing something in her voice. She reassured them gently, "Don't be afraid for me. I'm already in good hands." And when they asked whose hands, she only smiled and said, "The same hands that carried me when I couldn't stand." One night, Lucia awoke in the darkness, her room faintly lit by the glow of moonlight through the window. The house was quiet, so quiet she could hear the soft tick of the clock in the next room. Then, in the stillness, it came, the voice she had known once before, soft, loving, unmistakable. Lucia. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. "I know that voice," she whispered, her hands trembling. "You've done well, my daughter. You've walked faithfully. You've loved in my name." She covered her face, overwhelmed. "I wasn't strong, Lord. I barely made it." No," the voice said, "but you let me carry you. That was enough." Her tears fell freely now. "Are you coming for me?" she whispered. The air grew warmer, the light around her bed brightened faintly, and the voice came once more. "Soon. Rest now, the lifting is almost complete." And for the first time since her youth, Lucia fell asleep without pain, her heart full, her spirit at peace, her soul waiting with a gentle smile. The dawn came quietly, pale gold spreading across the sky, soft and tender like a final blessing. Lucia's neighbor, who had promised to check on her each morning, knocked gently at her door. There was no answer. The door, as always, was unlocked. Inside, the little house was bathed in light. The window curtains swayed with the morning breeze, and beside the chair by the bed sat an open Bible, Psalm 73, underlined in trembling ink. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Lucia's head rested gently on her pillow. Her lips curved into a soft smile. One hand lay over her chest, the other open, as though she had been reaching towards something or someone. And perhaps she had, because though her frail body lay still, her spirit had risen, lifted at last, completely, beautifully, into the arms that had carried her through every weakness. The morning that began on earth ended in heaven. Lucia had not stopped living. She had only been lifted higher. When Lucia opened her eyes again, it was not to the dim light of her room, but to a radiance beyond anything she could have imagined. It wasn't blinding. It was beautiful, warm, alive. Every color seemed to breathe, and standing before her was the one she had loved in faith, the one she had whispered to in the dark, the one who had lifted her when she could no longer rise, Jesus. There were no words between them at first. There didn't need to be. She simply looked into his eyes, eyes that carried both eternity and tenderness, and every question she had ever carried melted into peace. He smiled gently, reaching out his hand. Lucia, he said softly, you've rested long enough. Come now, let me lift you home. As he drew her into his embrace, every trace of weakness vanished. The ache, the loneliness, the long years of struggle, all fell away like a garment that no longer fit. And for the first time in her life, she stood in perfect strength, not the strength of the body, but the strength of being completely loved. She wept, though there were no tears, whispering, I was so tired. He smiled again. I know. That's why I carried you. And then, surrounded by light and peace, he lifted her higher still. Back on earth, the world went on. Days passed, seasons turned, but Lucia's little home remained filled with a peace that words could not describe. Those who entered felt it instantly, that same warmth, that same stillness she had once carried in her presence. It was as though her spirit lingered in the air, whispering softly to weary souls, You are not forgotten. You will be lifted too. Her children visited often now. They sat in her chair, read from her Bible, and spoke of her with quiet reverence. They said she had changed toward the end, that her weakness had become her strength, her silence, her song. And they were right, for Lucia's story didn't end with her last breath. It became a living testimony, a reminder that no heart is too tired, no soul too worn for the touch of Jesus. The same hands that lifted her still lift others. The same love that carried her still carries us. And somewhere, in that place beyond the veil, Lucia walks in light, never again weary, never again alone, her heart forever held in the arms that once bent down to lift her.